Hello, thank you for joining our Youth Summit 2020, Stories of Strength and Resiliency. I'm Dr. Nacole Milbrook, Chief Program Officer here at Youth Guidance. It almost goes without saying that 2020 has been a year like no other. Our lives have changed, our worlds have been turned upside down with the pandemic, social justice, and political turmoil. Most affected by it are often our youth and young adults. So during this critical time, Youth Guidance has had to be nimble and pivot to address the emerging needs of those we serve. Initially, those needs included access to technology. This soon evolved to financial needs, food insecurity, unstable housing, healthcare access, joblessness, mental health challenges, and more. Our youth, like us, were confused, fearful, depressed, and lonely. But this is not a story of succumbing. This is a story of resilience and coming together to support each other. It has been nothing short of amazing that our staff, dealing with their own challenges and caring for their families, doubled down to help our youth and families know they were not alone. They did this by holding one-on-one sessions, holding virtual BAM and WOW sessions, counseling sessions with youth and even their parents, helping with emergency cash assistance, food drives, handing out PPE, holding back to school events while social distancing, of course, that included delivering 2,000 backpacks to youth this summer, as well as PPE, helping youth and their parents find jobs, sometimes not once but twice, connecting youth and their families to numerous vital resources and services. If the past year has shown us anything, it is that if we can come together, we can empower one another. In a minute, you'll hear from my colleagues about what we did this summer, inspired by those we serve. That'll be followed by a panel discussion with some of our amazing program alumni.
Most of my kids' parents are essential workers, they're frontline workers. So a lot of these jobs that my kids were working, their parents were working. And at the same time, their parents were losing their jobs and students were losing their jobs. This is a difficult time, and actually living through it and seeing the emotions that my young people go through it. It hit me close to home.
The point is we have to be nimble because we're going to have challenges. Things are going to come up. And we have to assess, like, what are the needs of not just our participants, but also of our communities.
I'm not only educating my kids on how to do what they need to do in order to survive during this situation, but I'm also supporting parents.
The fact of, a shutdown and, you not knowing where your next paycheck is going to be and not knowing about food and things of that nature, that's very real. I mean, this was real before for some of my guys as far as them coming to school and, having their meals or, certain things of that nature. That was very real. But with COVID hitting in the way that it did, it was very real as far as making sure that they got, just the bare necessities met.
I would go on runs, right, in Belmont Cragen, where I live now, in West Garfield Park in Austin, at different times of the day, right? In the morning, in the afternoon, at 2 a.m. Just when I felt like running, I would go for a run. And I would see the same faces, the same dudes who were just out there. For me, I'm just like, man, y'all are just wasting your time out here hanging out. But then I started to see my students, current BAM students or former BAM students, just hanging out outside. And I'm like, yo, it's a whole pandemic going on out here.
I also miss BAM, my BAM brothers, my BAM meetings. It's very important to me because I always look forward to seeing my BAM counselor and express to him how I was feeling every day if I had to get something off my chest. And to my BAM brothers too, we created such a bond that I would just go up to them and be like, I need your help with this, I'm having trouble with this. And I miss doing that. I miss being able, to be one-on-one with them and be like, yo, I'm going through this, I need help with this. Or just hearing them out and putting myself in their perspective and hearing other people's issues.
Hi, welcome everybody to the My Vision, My Journey Wow 2020 graduation celebration.
I am Belinda Hill of Youth Guidance, and I have the honor of being your mistress of ceremonies today. We are here to celebrate the accomplishments of the students in Project Prepare Blues 13th cohort. Yes, today is your graduation day, and it's the first virtual graduation in our program's history. So let's take a moment to digest that information.
Certainly we aren't able to celebrate that in person. I am so proud that I can come to Chicago often. The AMA headquarters are there, but we certainly cannot celebrate in person. But it is so important that we get together to recognize, as was already stated, the hard work, your persistence, your perseverance in reaching this milestone today.
We definitely talked about what was their feelings on the situations, especially because it touched every neighborhood really in Chicago, unless you were somewhere else. But for the most part, it touched every neighborhood. So we got a lot of feedback. I got a lot of feedback from my guys, and I just let them know if they had any questions or anything like that. But they just wanted to talk, that I was always there.
Starting a community cleanup with the BAM boys who were present, right? Former BAM students and current BAM students, where they were paid to clean up the community, and those funds were used to buy materials that we needed to clean up in the community, and the bulk of it was used to pay them hourly minimum wage to clean up the community.
One thing that I was actually glad for, I've always been glad of this, that when I was in BAM, I always had someone to go talk to.
Sam has made sure to always check up on me and, my brother and some of my other friends every week, like, yo, you guys good? How's everything at home? Just making sure if we need anything or if we straight, because I know Sam will go out of his way to make it happen and make sure that it's good.
These young adults have more drive than I can imagine, and they push through so much adversity. Like, it's so much stuff that these kids go through, and yet they get through it.
Continue to bring forth owning your own narrative. Continue to bring forth self-awareness. Continue to bring forth your emotional intelligence. Continue to bring forth healthy relationships. Continue to bring forth your leadership. Continue to bring forth your visionary goal setting. Wow, graduates, bring forth all of you in your awesomeness. And today, I humbly salute every last one of you, and live your best life.
We talk about the two types of energy in BAM, right? Savage and warrior. We definitely had a lot of those warrior thoughts and feelings, right? Like being compelled to keep going, right? To build, on what we started.
Wow, we are living in a turbulent time. We are fighting for social justice, educational and economic equity, to be heard and to be respected. And most of all, we are fighting a pandemic. Despite the many conditions we are fighting for and against, you are weathering the storm. You have graduated. You have persevered. You have been resilient. You are empowered.
Love is love, and it doesn't matter where it comes from.
In my storm, take the world. We got this.
This was a difficult time for a lot of us, but honestly, this was a great learning experience for all of us. I was able to build a huge platform virtually that I thought I would never do. And I'm somebody that's not a whiz with computers, but I was able to build that for my kids. And knowing the fact that moving forward, whatever happens in life, I just know that I have the opportunity to still provide the same services I will provide for kids in person. I can do it virtually. We can do anything, you know, the power of just drive and being persistent and just wanting to just be a go-getter. You can do anything you want to do. And that proved to me this year, because this was definitely a difficult year for all of us.
What an amazing video that was. Just being reminded of the incredible response from our staff, our just collective response to youth who needed it. Staff who are providing social and emotional services during a double pandemic are having to compartmentalize their own needs. And it is totally worth it at times, because it's such an inspiration to see this generation of young people going through all of the things that they're having to go through that nobody could have predicted, including missing really important milestones like graduations, losing loved ones to COVID and violence, and just dealing with everyday systemic racism. Watching these young people continue to study and work and just generally shine is such an inspiration. And I'm so excited. We are honored to really just be a part of the support system for the youth that we serve. We absolutely cannot do this work alone. I'd like to acknowledge Youth Guidance's CEO, Michelle Adler Morrison, for her leadership during this unprecedented time. I'd also like to thank all of you for attending and joining this important conversation. I'd like to introduce Dr. Janice Jackson, CEO of Chicago Public Schools. Dr. Jackson, in her admission essay, wrote that her goal was to one day be the CEO of CPS. Her former mentor shared that no graduate student had ever written that before. She holds a master's in leadership and administration and a doctorate in education in political studies and urban school leadership from the University of Illinois at Chicago. She was a member of the University of Chicago's Network for College Success and is a past board member of the Chicago Children's Advocacy Center. She was also honored by the National Council of Negro Women Chicago as a woman making history, and she is. I am honored to share this conversation with her today. Please meet Dr. Janice Jackson, CEO of Chicago Public Schools.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Milbrook, for that wonderful introduction. I always laugh when I hear that anecdote about that what I wrote in my grad application. And it's true. I imagined a lot of things for my future early on, but never did I imagine I would be leading Chicago Public Schools in 2020, in a year like 2020. So I think the takeaway from that is that you have to always be prepared for anything. It makes it easier because I actually am doing my dream job every day. I want to give a shout out to all of the students who are participating in today's session. Anytime I get to do this, it's a treat for me personally as a lifelong educator. You know, in this role, I don't get to interact with students as often. So even just giving you a few words is something that brings me great joy. But I feel like it's important to give you a special call out because you could be doing anything today. And you're taking time out of your schedule to come together and learn and fellowship and celebrate all that Youth Guidance has done to support you. And on behalf of the district, I really just want to thank Youth Guidance for your partnership. BAM and WOW, our flagship programs, we talk about them all the time, and you really are doing remarkable work. The title today, Strength and Resilience, I think is very fitting. And as I was listening to all of the services that you provided during the pandemic, I was just blown away. I want to thank you for doing that because like you, Chicago Public Schools had to pivot very quickly and do the things that we're uniquely positioned to do, which is support our kids and educate them. We all know that schools are much more than the brick and mortar and a place where you go to learn your ABCs or the curriculum. Our kids rely on us for a lot of stuff, most notably a lot of basic needs. And so we too had to shift to distribute devices. We distributed over 185,000 devices and counting because Sometimes they break and we have to replace them. That's another story for another day. But we continue to serve food. We served over 26 million meals. During normal times, Chicago Public Schools, we always say we're the largest restaurant in the state in the state of Illinois because we serve so many meals every single day to our students, and we couldn't turn that off because of the pandemic. We're also excited because we were able to do some things that were pretty innovative during that time. I always say that you have to take advantage of crises. It's easy to get down and kind of get down on yourself about the conditions, but there's also opportunity and crises. And two things that I wanted to highlight was our Chicago Connected program, which is the largest internet provider program in the entire United States. So Chicago Public Schools is providing free broadband, which is extremely important, internet connectivity to 100,000 students. So about a third of our students, a little less than a third of our students. This is the largest program in the country, and we're doing it not just during the pandemic, but we're going to do it for the next 4 years because we want to create a pathway to making sure that internet accessibility is ubiquitous and people have it the same way they have other utilities like light, gas, and water. It is a necessity, and it's a necessity for our kids to be successful. Another thing that we did, we fast-tracked our Skyline Curriculum, which is an online curriculum. And so many of the students that are on the call, you probably are seeing these lessons now. We created this program prior to the pandemic to bring about more equity. We didn't think it was fair that algebra on the north side looked different than algebra on the south side. And so we wanted to make clear what students should know and be able to do at every single point throughout their high school career, and make sure that we're preparing you for college, careers, and beyond. And so again, I think necessity is the mother of invention, as I stated earlier, and there's been a lot of innovations that have come out of that program. But I want the students to also tap into that as well. Like many of you, you probably committed to learning something new during the pandemic. I hope you stay true to that. If you didn't do it, I would encourage you to do that. But I also want to applaud you for your resilience in grappling with what none of us could have prepared you for. I said this when we were trying to celebrate graduations and make those special moments more memorable, just like you guys did at Youth Guidance. I told all of the students, you're different. You have survived something that no one else can say they've been through. No other generation can say the same thing. And I hope that when you are met with challenges in life, and trust me, you will be met with those challenges in life, I hope you hearken back to this time and realize that you are strong, that you can get through this, and most importantly, you are resilient. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the district's response to another, what I would call a pandemic, and that is the injustice that many of us as African Americans in particular experience in this country. It's not new, there's no secret, but the murder of George Floyd brought that stuff into clear focus this year. And I cannot express enough how proud I have been at the youth for standing up, just like they did in the 1960s, another era that I wish I had an opportunity to live through. I got a chance to live through it as the CEO and see so many of our students responding. We were able to respond with curriculum that was able to address that and help you have meaningful and sometimes tough conversations in the classroom with your peers. I hope that that's still happening in your virtual classrooms. And if it isn't, you should be the one to raise up those issues, because it's not a point in time. Now is the time for us to make the kind of change that we truly want to see in this country. I also want to give a special nudge to those of you who are 18 this year. You should vote in this election. I won't tell you who to vote for. That is your right and your choice, but you should vote in this election. A lot of people sacrificed a lot for you to be able to do that, and I hope you take advantage of that. Finally, I want to give a shout out to some of our other partners that have been supporting this work. Lurie's Center for Childhood Resilience has really supported Chicago Public Schools. We know that social emotional issues were already present prior to COVID, but they were exacerbated with the pandemic. And so we really appreciate their support. And I also want to give a shout out to the MICFA Challenge students who work on a variety of boards, who have done amazing work around advocacy. One thing that you probably heard a lot about was the work we did around SROs and helping us to, they didn't weigh in on the decision per se, but they have told us, if you're going to have officers in our schools, this is what we demand. And I really want to applaud them for their leadership and courage, speaking truth to power. I share all of this because I want you to understand that I truly believe in the power of student voice, and programs like the programs that Youth Guidance provides for students in CPS really help to develop those skills so that you can be the change that we all want to see. So again, I don't know if this is a time to say congratulations. It looked like you guys were already partying a couple of months ago. But as we kick off this school year, I just want to encourage you to stay connected with this program. And I want to thank Youth Guidance. I want to thank Michelle and the entire leadership team there for supporting Chicago Public Schools. You make our hard job just that much easier because we know that you have our backs. So thank you.
Jackson, we know that you've got a really busy schedule, so thank you so much for making the time to come and share those words with us and with our young people and with our supporters. We really appreciate it. Now I'd like to introduce you all to our moderator for today, Tyra Martin. Tyra Martin is a 6-time Emmy-nominated 22-year news and entertainment producer at WGN Chicago. She is also a member of the film industry's traveling press junket, serves as the executive producer of WGN's community affairs program called People to People, a show that gives voice to the concerns and solution finders in Chicago's Black community. Tyra is a proud member of the Chicago International Film Festival's Black Perspectives Committee, the African American Film Critics Association, the National Association of Black Journalists, and in her free time, she hosts a monthly series called The Exclusive and mentors up and coming journalists. I am tired just reading all of that. Welcome, Tyra.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Milbrook, for that wonderful introduction from the bio that I wrote. So I appreciate it. It's all wonderful, all the wonderful things. I just want to add to the conversation, welcoming all the students and educators that are joining us in this conversation. It's an important one to have to catch up with our youth. As you mentioned, I am part of the Film Junket Press, which means I interview a lot of celebrities, but there are a few opportunities to speak to people as important as the youth, far more engaging and important to our future than any celebrity I've ever met. So with that, let's talk to two now. I'd like to introduce Christian Champagne and Lurie Tapia. Lurie is a WOW Working on Womanhood alumna who attended John Hancock High School and is studying at Case Western Reserve, a private research university in Cleveland. She wants to be a biomedical engineer, which is fascinating. Christian is a Becoming a Man BAM program alum who attended Hyde Park High School and Western University. He's currently an entrepreneur specializing in branding and marketing, the creative side of marketing specifically, and he works with community organizations on the weekends to pay it forward and to empower young people. Welcome to Christian and Lurie. I'm going to ask you guys a few questions and we'll talk about it. Lurie, let's start with you first. What does hope and resiliency mean to you, and how does that reflect on what you've learned from your time in WOW?
To me, hope is the difference between giving up and hanging on, and resiliency means moving towards your goals despite the circumstances. So these are really crazy times right now, but having hope is believing that we'll get through this being the pandemic or whatever personal challenges you're facing. And during my time in WOW, my friends and I shared our personal struggles during our meetings, and it was empowering to know that others have or are currently going through the struggles that I'm facing, and they got through it and they're happy now. So that's really great to see. And the discussions in WOW taught me emotional intelligence and what it means to reflect on my feelings and to see the positive side of things.
Christian, what do those words mean to you, hope and resiliency?
Hope is the mental and resiliency is the action to keep moving forward past your goals and to succeed in life. I learned a lot through BAM, through self-determination, visionary goal setting, and accountability and integrity.
And how does that reflect, how do you reflect on what you learned from your time in BAM specifically with that?
That time in BAM was just like probably the best time of my life. So I carry a lot of good memories with my brothers and then the counselors as well. So they all give me support when I need it, and I give them support to keep moving forward and to be resilient towards your goals.
Yeah, the program itself kind of embodies the idea of hope and resiliency. Christian, we'll stay with you. How did you take those lessons and apply them to the challenges that we're all facing this year?
Yeah, of course you want to be resilient towards your goals. So at the beginning of the year, I was working 2 jobs and then on the board for the alumni initiative as well. And then I lost those jobs, unfortunately, but I maintained determination to actually make it out of what my situation was before. So I learned about the stock market and invest the little money that I had. And then I made a great return, I would say. And then, so those lessons of just, you give your all more than anything, and then it in come back to you.
Lurie, what about you?
Yeah, so COVID interrupted my life, to say the least. When it hit the hardest, I was a high school senior in my 2nd semester, so when traditionally all the fun stuff gets to really happen, but unfortunately I didn't get to experience many of the traditional things. Like I didn't have a prom, I didn't have an in-person graduation celebration, and it was really unfortunate and disappointing at the time because I couldn't celebrate high school how I wanted to. Like I had worked so hard during that time and I wasn't able to celebrate. But like I mentioned, I was doing a lot of reflecting and just goal setting during my time in quarantine. And I remember that I hadn't worked so hard in high school for the 4 years. I wasn't working hard just to graduate. I was working hard for beyond that because I knew I would have a life beyond those 4 years. And I knew that I needed to have hope and keep being resilient because like now I know I'll have a life after this pandemic, whether that's in a year or 2 years. I know that life will keep going on. And yeah.
I know Christian talked just a couple of moments ago about brushing up on the stock market and kind of really fine-tuning those skills during this period. What have you learned? How did you take Dr. Jackson's challenge to learn something new during this time?
Yeah, so I really learned how to advocate for myself during this time. So I was a high schooler, so I depended a lot on my peers or my mentors that I had, but I realized to a certain extent I had to be more independent. And that's when I started applying to a lot of scholarships, and Youth Guidance Greer Scholarship being one of them. So I really learned how to present myself in a professional and good manner and was able to advocate and say what I think I deserved in life. And through that, I was fortunate enough to earn that scholarship and is now contributing to my financial college experience right now. So
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. You stayed connected to Youth Guidance during these extraordinary times. How did the connection empower you? Lurie.
Okay, so besides financially being a great supportive system, it was just Youth Guidance has really made me realize that someone's always rooting for me and rooting for my success. And it's just great to see that, especially during this pandemic, I'm able to make new connections with people that I wasn't even previously able to meet in person. And just knowing that you can still make connections during this time is really powerful. And as I don't think I previously mentioned this, but I'm a 1st-generation college student. So having those connections to people that are currently in college or have gone through college is super beneficial, because there's so much about the college experience, especially when you're dorming, which I am right now, that you don't know until you've lived through it. Like being away from your community or just being homesick, like those are things that you have to learn. But knowing that I have people that can support me during that time and have gone through similar experiences is really nice, because they've been able to steer me in the right direction and let me know that things do get better and that it's okay to feel upset at sometimes, but it does get better at the end.
Christian, what about you? I think you told me when we spoke last week, you're a 1st-gen college graduate as well, right?
Correct.
Or soon to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's that experience been like for you, and how has becoming a man empowered you to be that first student in your family?
It was actually crazy because I went to Morehouse my 1st year of college, And then I absolutely didn't know nothing about how college works. I didn't know about how to get my books, FAFSA, or anything. So I was really blowing up my my counselor's phone, like, how do you do this? How do you do that? And then once you get a little bit of shut out, because of course he has a lot of things going on his own, it was like I really needed my network. And fortunately, Youth Guidance gave me a broad network of people that I could communicate, who could give me those inside tracks or at least some knowledge. And then I was given the same knowledge to my friends about how to go about things as well. I didn't want to. I stayed connected because I didn't want to leave Youth Guidance alone. I was more so a bug, calling Michelle every day or emailing her, trying to figure out how to navigate college correctly. And they gave me a lot of knowledge, and in return, I will do anything they ask me to do. So it's a beautiful relationship that Youth Guidance gave we established.
What are you hopeful about right now?
I wouldn't say I'm hopeful, but I'm grateful for everything that this past year taught me about myself, that I have the knowledge to learn anything that I put my mind to. I'm grateful for having my new apartment. I'm grateful to see 25, as well as in a city that I lost many of friends in, who barely got to see 17 or 18. So I'm just grateful for life right now.
Lurie, what about you? What are you hopeful about? What are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to being able to make new connections with the Alumni Initiative, and I'm just grateful for having this experience and be able to speak to you all today. And besides, like, being able to finally go to college, which is something I've always dreamed of, and being able to chase my dreams in the future that I always wanted, I'm hopeful for the future. I know it's a really broad term, but a lot of things have risen to the surface now and are finally being seen and talked about, like issues with our health system and our justice system. And it's really empowering to see that a lot of the people that are advocating are young people that I've grown up with and I know. And I'm just hopeful that things are finally being talked about. And it's a really empowering time to live through, and we're seeing history change, and I'm proud to see that change and be a part of it. And I'm really looking forward to more change since it's been long overdue.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I joined hundreds of people, and at least 100 and more than 100, close to 150 people joining us here today, saying that I'm so proud of you both. And I thank you for your time and for being a light to your peers and those around you, and eventually the next generation. So thank you for sharing your thoughts today. I'd like to invite the audience to post some questions. We got a little time for Dr. Milbrook to answer questions, and anything that you guys want to contribute to the conversation. So those watching, please go to our chat section and put those questions in. While those are coming in, Dr. Milbrook, I just wanted to talk to you as an organization, how has Youth Guidance leaned in to empower youth and young adults?
Good question. There's a couple of things that have been really important to Youth Guidance as we support young people during this time. And one of them is listening to them, finding out from young people what they need and how they need us to show up. We have incorporated a comprehensive needs assessment now just into our regular services, because we need to always be asking young people what they need, and those needs are changing. The other thing that's been important to us is to celebrate young people. They're still accomplishing things. The world is upside down, but they're still doing what they do. So we want to make sure that somebody is behind them, being their cheerleader.
And what have you learned during this time?
Oh, good question. So I've learned so many things. I have learned, well, the first thing is working like this is very, very different. I used to be one of those people who thought it was really difficult to do and teach and support human services work without human contact. And I have learned that it's relative. We've all been in contact and we feel connected even though we have not been physically together. So that's one of the main things that I've learned.
Yeah, I think we're all still learning, ing that one for sure.
Yes.
What are you looking forward to? What message of hope do you have for any of the students that are listening in today?
So it's weird to even have to give a message of hope for people who are so hopeful already. But my message is to be true to who you are, continue to learn and grow, because that's the most important thing. At some point, at least one of these pandemics is going to be over. I'm not as hopeful that they both will, but I know that at least one of these will be over at some point. And our lives are going to resume. They're going to go back to some form of normalcy. So be prepared for that and continue to learn and grow and reach for your goals.
Well, thank you, Dr. Milbrook. It's been great to be in conversation with you. I'm going to toss it over to you, and we've got another person we're going to meet.
All right. So now I would like to introduce Dr. Mashana Smith, Lurie Center for Childhood Resilience. Dr. Smith is a psychologist at the Pritzker Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Health. She is also assistant professor of psychiatry and behavioral services at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. Thank you, Dr. Smith, for joining our conversation. You've been such a powerful advocate for our city's youth and have continued to elevate an important narrative around how our children are more than their trauma. For that, we remain deeply grateful. Oh, you're on mute.
Another Zoom mishap. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Milbrook, for having me, and to the entire Youth Guidance team. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Well, I have a couple of questions for you.
Absolutely.
You've said that our children and older youth are so much more than their trauma. Love that phrase. How can we as parents, counselors, caregivers help our children and youth feel supported?
Great question. So yes, I wholeheartedly believe that our youth are so much more than their trauma. Having said that, we do recognize that many of our youth have been traumatized. In terms of advice or suggestions, recommendations that I would offer to parents and caregivers is that it's really important to understand what are some of the signs and normal reactions that you might see in youth who have experienced a traumatic event. Oftentimes young people think that they're going crazy because of the kind of reaction that they're having in response to the trauma that they perceive, and they indeed are not going crazy. So I think it's really helpful to be aware of what are those signs and symptoms, know that many of them are normal, and then also to be able to recognize when they've gone on beyond the length of time that we would expect, in case there is more of a traumatic effect, if you will, on the experience for the youth. So also knowing when to seek mental health services if necessary for youth is what I'd recommend to our many caregivers who are out there. The other thing I'd recommend, though, we've been talking about resilience quite a bit today. And I just want to be clear, resilience is not something that's always intrinsic to a young person. It's not pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. But resilience can often come from our environment, from our loved ones, from our parents' support, from teaching coping skills and how to deal with situations. It can come from involvement in different activities, whether that's being a part of our churches or being a part of activities at school, being a part of athletics. It could be art, it could be music. So I just encourage our parents and teachers and caregivers to also support youth in all of the many ways to kind of build resilience. So those are two things I recommend.
Two great things. As we continue to create safe spaces for our young people, can you share why programs like BAM and WOW and the counseling work that Youth Guidance delivers is so critical for student success?
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad that you had Dr. Jackson on. I too was at Chicago Public Schools prior to coming to Lurie's, and so I had the opportunity to work with BAM and WOW in many ways, and I will just say it's awesome for so many reasons. So a lot of my work personally has been in the area of trauma responsive schools and making sure that the schools are responsive. And what we know for sure are there are three things that youth benefit from. One is not just feeling safe physically, but youth need to feel safe emotionally. They need to have a safe place to be able to express their emotions, how it is they're feeling, allow themselves to be vulnerable. One thing, super important. The second thing that we know for sure is that relationships matter. Relationships are the intervention. Having someone who you can trust, the research actually shows that if you have at least one caring adult in their life, their chances for success increase exponentially. And that is what BAM and WOW offers, right? The relationships are amazing that are developed, and that's very important. But the third thing that youth need is they need to be able to develop skills, particularly skills around kind of managing their emotions and all of the many different feelings that they experience. And they need to be able to really engage in problem solving, right? How do you solve problems? How do you address them? And what we know is that BAM and WOW attends to all of those. It's ensuring that safety. It's developing those relationships that are meaningful. Earlier, Christian talked about he could still go back and talk to these people. He had formed deep relationships. Those are important, right? And then also teaching them the lifelong skills that they need in order to be successful in college and beyond. So, love BAM and WOW, doing excellent work.
Thank you. Dr. Smith, if every young person had early access to culturally relevant supports, what kind of impact do you think that would have for our city today?
I think a couple of things at a couple of levels. I mentioned that my work centers around trauma responsiveness, but also it's just related to racism. And so I think if youth have more culturally relevant services, one, I think that would limit the amount or the chances of youth having what we call internalized racism. So internalizing the negative messages that they receive, thinking that there are limitations on their own ability or their own worth. I think culturally relevant supports help a lot to minimize the likelihood of that occurring. The other thing I would say in terms of the importance is I think the more that supports are culturally relevant and really speak to, particularly in the area of social justice, and speak to activism and different social movements that have occurred in time, that you really help youth and empower youth to begin to take on activism and take on leadership in their communities and in the city. So I think that's the impact that it can have on our great city.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. My last question for you. What is your message of hope that you'd like to share with our young people who are listening in today?
I don't know, I just got so much hope just being here and watching the videos and the graduation and all the experiences. I think the message I would share and leave with young people is that there are so many people who care about you. I know we see a lot in the news and you experience a lot, and that's reality too. But there are so many people who care about you. Listen to Dr. Jackson talk about the leadership and what she's doing at CPS and ensuring that the district is caring about you. There are so many others. My work focuses on building trauma responsive schools and helping educators, but there's so many people who are like us and like all of your mentors and your guidance and youth guidance. So I would just say, you know, if you're sitting out there and asking a question like, well, where are these people? Ask for them. Until just ask, say, you know, you're looking for someone who can do this and offer you this, whatever it may be, and keep asking until you find that person, because we're out here. There's so many people who care about you. And the only other thing I would say is I really encourage you to dream a bright future, seek a bright future. The potential is there, the possibility is there, and seek out others who can help you achieve that. But yeah, I think the future is promising.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and everybody who has participated in this panel discussion. Now I'd like to open up to you all to ask questions of Dr. Smith. So I'd like to start with young people. So young people, please feel free to ask any questions you may have about programming throughout COVID-19. So let's see, there are a couple of questions that are in the Q&A. There's one question on how can youth mobilize their peers 18 and up to go out to vote during this next election that will impact everyone. Dr. Smith, do you want to respond to that?
So there are a number of ways. I can't say I'm an expert in this area, but there are a number of ways, a number of groups. There are a lot of there's a lot of mobilization occurring across organizations coming together to do almost like text campaigns where folks are texting their friends and texting their networks, using your social media, reaching out to family and friends to really encourage folks to vote. So that's one thing that I'm doing personally. And I could recommend that youth do it too. Build your network, find out, whether or not people are voting, encourage them to. You don't have to be too intrusive to do it. Text messaging is wonderful. To be able to connect with people, and social media. So I would definitely recommend that.
Okay, good answer. Another question from the Q&A. What's a lesson from this time that youth guidance will take into the future? Oh, that's a question for us. So there's a lot of lessons from right now that youth guidance is taking into the future. And one of them is you never know what's coming, so always be ready. Our work is always changing, our field is always changing, people are always changing. But the other big thing that we've taken away and will definitely come with us in the future is the really important concept of meeting youth where they are. Youth guidance has always had that as a value. And this pandemic, we have had to put our money where our mouth is for real, because we do largely school-based programming, but youth are not at school right now. They're in school, but not physically at school. And we have had to meet them where they are. So I anticipate that in the future, we will be continuing to do very creative programming that meets youth where they are. It has pushed us to be creative, and I think we'll continue to do so. So many students, another question from the chat, so many students are stressed out. Can you explain what trauma-informed schools look like and how programs like BAM and WOW fit in with that? I think that one is for you, Dr. Smith.
Sure. So trauma-responsive schools look like many things. One, and first and foremost, it looks like really caring staff, a very safe and supportive environment. And so it looks like, knowing who in the school is available to support you. And it shouldn't just be a counselor or a social worker or a psychologist or your BAM counselor or your WOW counselor, but it should really be everyone in the school. Being able to develop caring relationships with teaching staff, or it could be your lunchroom staff, it could be any member of the school team. And so that's first and foremost important. Earlier, I mentioned for parents and caregivers to be aware of what interventions or supports are available in the event that you need that. But it's also important, particularly at your age, that you know what resources are available to you. That I hear some of you just talking about being self-advocates and kind of being more independent. Learn what's available to you. Who are the people who you could speak to if you have a mental health concern, for example. So I think that's a part of a trauma-responsive school, is doing that as well, right? Another part of trauma-responsive school is just helping to educate your staff. We've done many focus groups with young people, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and they think it's really important that educators understand mental health, that educators understand, to the person's question who asked this question, that how youth are experiencing stress, what impact that may have on them, being able to share that with teachers if your stress is impacting you academically, to be able to share that, have someone who you can go to and let them know how your trauma, if you've experienced trauma, is impacting you, and being able to have those honest discussions. I think, BAM and WOW are wonderful because of the relationships that are formed with your counselor, having an advocate within the school building. I know we aren't in school now, but having an advocate who can also be there to have those discussions with the school is wonderful. So I think that's one of many ways in which BAM is there to support and being trauma informed.
Thank you. So the next question looks like it is for me. Looking forward to 2021, what are you most excited for youth guidance to accomplish? Oh, I think this is probably for both of us, but I can start. I think I am most excited for youth guidance to accomplish reinventing our programs for what's next, because we know what it's like to deliver services the way we did pre-COVID. We know what it's like to deliver services during COVID, although that's ever changing. But post-COVID, I expect that things are going to be even different. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that happen. I'm also really looking forward to seeing our alumni program grow so that we continue to support youth and they can come back and, so they can just come back and inspire others.
Yeah, and I don't know how much I can add to that, but I'm going to build off what you said, Dr. Milbrook. I'm excited too, because I wonder with the future and post-COVID, just the opportunities that may exist to expand the reach of BAM and WOW in ways that may not have been imagined previously. So I'm excited. I think it's a wonderful program.
Great. I have a question from Principal King at Arthur Ashe Broadcasting for the middle school students. One of my 8th grade female students wants to know what made you decide to do this type of work. This is asked of both of the presenters. Would you like to start, Dr. Smith?
Sure, I'll start. I actually took psychology in high school here at Kenwood Academy, where I attended, and loved the class, first of all. So I was just driven and motivated to be a psychologist at that point, but I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. But early on in college, I just really feel like academic achievement is so important, particularly for African American youth. And I wanted to play a role in academic achievement, but more from a mental health perspective. And I recognize the way in which mental health and how one is doing socially and emotionally really impacts their ability to function academically. And so I wanted to help address that, help address social and emotional needs in kids so that they could achieve their optimal level of functioning and ability. So I chose it for that reason and have been in it 20 plus years now.
My answer is very similar to yours. I took psychology for the first time in high school too, and fell in love with it immediately. Always been somebody who is curious and interested in human beings and what motivates behavior. We see a lot of behavior in general just in society that does not make sense to us out here, and I've always been so curious about that private logic, because all behavior is purposeful. People do things for a reason, and it has always been fascinating to me to find out what those reasons are. As I started to study more and get into the field, it became really important to me to learn more about what behavioral health services look like in Black and Brown communities. The field itself, the work itself is very, very important. Healing from all of the multiple traumas, including, delivering social emotional learning services. These are things that are just really important in our communities, and our communities haven't always been embracing of healthcare services, particularly behavioral health services, and for good reason. So I really wanted to go into this field and keep doing this work to try to, one, inspire more people of color to do the same, and to two, be able to change the face of what the work does and looks like, so that it can continue to be more culturally relevant as time goes on. You all have some great questions. So I am going to do one more question. This question is for the students. How will the students, the young people, how will you all stay engaged between now and the next election?
So what I've been doing with my friends, so I'm currently on campus and I've been fortunate enough to safely social distance from my friends. So we've been watching the debates together, and we've been having discussions one-on-one with each other and also in smaller groups. So I think that's been really beneficial to start the conversation close to me. And also I've been able to have those conversations with my parents over the phone. So I think that's been really great.
Yeah, so we just watched the debates together, or we would text each other in a group chat, just to see if, well, I usually hang around with some people that have different opposing views, and then we try to educate them as well, just so we can find common ground as too. Make sure you go out and vote as well. I think this is going to be a pinnacle for not only presidential but state level as well. So yeah.
Wise words indeed. Thank you both for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you all for being a part of this program and a part of the panel. And we are at the end of our programming, but I really just want to thank everybody who's been involved here, and note that this work is only possible because of our supporters and the community at large. For our youth and young adults, it is an honor to be in service to this next generation of leaders. I cannot wait to see what you do. Thank you all, and that concludes our summit.